Lotus Petal is one of the single best cards in Magic's history, but also one of the best engines, backbones for many combo decks in Pauper. And for that reason, it's one of my favorite cards of all time. And I wanted to give you a walkthrough in this video of 4 different deck lists that take advantage of Lotus Petal, that if you have a copy of this card, pretty much build into any one of it. It's one of those things where if you got a bunch of decks sleeved up in the same sleeve and you just swap in between some staples, you can really build out a bunch of Pauper decks on the cheap. Now, in a format where they actually made an announcement earlier this year, Gavin Verhey did said later down the line he does want to make RCQs online for Pauper that let you kind of get invites into RCs and into the pro circuit. Maybe getting familiar with your competitive Pauper combo lines is where you want to be. Now, there are a lot of aspects to Lotus Petal, you know, being an artifact, giving you 1 mana of any color, adding a card to your graveyard count, a lot of things that work in its favor, but it's a one-time use. And with that, it implies speed. You want to have a little bit of flexibility, but you want to use something immediately when it comes to Lotus Petal. And therein lies its power when it comes to combo decks. It gives you 1 mana of any color, so it allows you to be flexible in the type of spells that you're winning with, rituals versus just threats. And also lets you do it again at any time while adding to even potentially storm count in one of them. Now, Lotus Petal is simple on its front side, but if we want to really identify where it's being used, you have to take a look at the Pauper metagame. And the combo decks that are using Lotus Petal are doing so on different axes of trying to beat 2 central things. Now, the combo decks are either trying to be really fast or really resilient, and sometimes they're a mix of both, but usually you want to be better at one because it's really hard in Pauper to do both, and that's the great part about Pauper. Now in Legacy right now, we have the whole problem with Oops All Spells taking over the Legacy metagame, and really all it took was the printing of 2 more untapped MDFCs, but that's a whole other thing. We don't have that here in Pauper. When it comes to Pauper combo, it's really balanced, it's very all-in, and they're relatively easy to answer, but it's the skill of the pilot that can really outdo the opponent. And so you're here to beat Burn and Blue Terror and midrange. Now, black-based midrange has taken a step back in the metagame with the loss of something like Deadly Dispute, but that doesn't mean that Jund Wildfires doesn't have what it takes to still make it to the top. In midrange, such as Land Destruction has also been back, with Elves being that super fast deck, Ephemeratron even blinking combat steps, but still the tempo-based strategies of Terror and Blue are still there, while Madness Burn looks to just, again, be faster than you. Affinity will always be that menace, but all in all, it acts like a tempo mid-range style strategy. So really, can you answer the counterspells, and can you be faster maybe than the counterspells? And that's what these Lotus Petal decks try to do. The first deck that we're going to talk about is my favorite, One Land Spy. This is my little baby here. This deck honestly is so all in, so all out. It's hard to get anything more than the thrill of this deck. Just have anything comparable in the Pauper format. Now, it's very all in, as I mentioned. Really what this deck revolves around is, again, you're milling yourself with the Spy package. So when I say the package, you're usually playing, again, a bunch of non-land spells, right? A bunch of them don't have MDSCs in this form, but you do have rituals. So what you do is in this format, you have 1 land, and you play the land because you're playing land grant, you're thinning out your deck, you're adding to your graveyard, and you generally need the land as a basis to cast your spells. A lot of people ask why you even need the land at all. In formats like Legacy and stuff, you have free mana and so many other ways to turn your mana around. You don't need the lands there. Here you do. So you play something like Land Grant, which lets you play the spell for free by returning, kind of revealing your hand and tuning for the land. You play that out. You have the Lotus Petals in there to be a little bit faster because you need the land out of your deck, but it comes in tapped. And that Lotus Petal is part of that turn 1 win. So if you have the Haunted Mire out, if you play Lotus Petal, if you go 3 Dark Rituals or 2 Dark Rituals and a Simian Spirit Guide exiled, you can then play Spy and win from there. Right, so you mill out your deck, you're gonna reanimate some Dregscape zombies, you're then gonna cast your reanimate spell, which is where your Dread Return right here. By sacrificing 3 creatures, you're gonna reanimate a Lot-Led Giant. All in, you just win the game from there based on the number of creatures in your graveyard. And so this is one of those first initial decks that loses very much to counterspells. Don't get me wrong. The deck list is gonna suffer, and there's been versions of this deck that run a red-green land out of the sideboard. You need it to be green specifically for something like Generous Ant and the Land Grant to play options like Pyroblast, for those. Now these decks are opting for more consistency in the ability to play Haunted Mire, or I believe this is the better route to play Haunted Mire, to, you know, just be able to continue to get your black sources to cast your rituals without the Lotus Petals, and you opt for Duress. So a lot of times in the tempo-based strategies, they really only have room for one counterspell or two counterspells in your hand. If you're, you know, a lot of times you do actually have the space to play around Spell Pierce to some degree, but if you can Duress away the counterspell, you're there. You have natural states for the artifact removal, such as or artifact decks, or artifact anti-hate, such as Nihil Spellbomb or Relic of Progenitus. Haunting Misery is your one way out of Fairy Macabre. You have no way to beat that card outside of Fairy Macabre, and then Jack-o'-lantern helps you flex into red for something like Flaring Pain against the white decks that look to prevent damage. Regardless, this deck is all-encompassing, all in. It is very much faster than the burn decks, and good against that, but bad against the counterspell decks. So that's where it kind of ultimately falls to, but it has the potential to turn one win. And that's why a lot of people do like it. The other deck is going to be the more recent 5-land Spy. Now, there's been a lot of iterations to this deck. This specific list is not my personal favorite, but there's been some variants testing out 4 lands. There's been some variants testing out 6 lands. I believe the magic number is 5 based on how the mana system and the resources of this deck work. But generally speaking, you're playing things like the Generous Ent, Sagu Wildling, Sakura Tribe Elder, and you're trying to get, you know, you're playing some range of 3 forests and 2 swamps. You get all 5 out. Then what you do is you spy yourself, and hopefully at some point you cast many partings. Many partings allow you to search your library for a basic, put in your hand, create a food token. You then Balustrade Spy. You have 5 lands out. You're going to use 4 of those for the Balustrade Spy. You're going to leave 1 black up. That 1 black is going to get back the Dregscape Zombie, and then the food token is going to get back your Cauldron Familiar. You're then going to go about the line of Dread returning to the Lotlet Giant. Great. The other line is if you have a Conjurer's Bauble out, you play a Balustrade Spy, you use the Conjurer's Bauble to put the 1 Songs of the Damned you have back from your graveyard into your deck and draw that, right? So that's gonna be the only card in your deck. You milled everything out. You play the Songs of the Damned with your last black. Then what you can do is you can crawl from the cellar to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. You would then return the Lotlet Giant. You could then, with all that mana, even reanimate the Dregscape Zombie again. You now, with that Lotlet Giant, have 3 creatures. You can Dread return back the second Lotlet Giant, and that's a great way for you to beat life gain against a lot of strategies, even like Bogles or something, if they manage to get enough life, or even against like white or Orzhov based decks that can get a lot of life triggers. That is a great way for this deck to beat that. Lotus Petal is key in this deck, not only to add speed, because there are situations where you can get that 5th land into your hand, but then still go off with 4 with something like Lotus Petal. But Lotus Petal also gives you the reach in this deck to be able to play out your mid-range plan first. So in the mid-game, maybe against something like Affinity, they might actually have a main board copy of Nihil Spellbomb or 2. You play that, well, you're not really going to have an answer to that in main board, so you're going to have to pivot. So you use the Lotus Petal to give you that 6 mana. That's 7th mana, or just the 6 mana 2 times. That 6 mana is going to allow you to hard cast Generous Ent. It's going to allow you to hard cast the Troll of Khazad-dûm that's in this deck as well. It's going to allow you to hard cast Sagu Wildling, which enters and gains you 3 life, which is very viable against something like Burn. So if you don't have your 5th land and a way to get it, you can play 4 Lotus Petal, play out your Sagu Wildling. You have now a 3/3 that can block anything out of Burn, which is mostly 2/2s, and gain 3 life. So a lot of value there. Again, this version of Spy opts for resiliency. So it has a plan that has a lot of mana, but can pivot, which is what I like about this deck. It's not super fast. It doesn't boast the turn 1 win. You cannot win on turn 1 with this deck. It loses a lot more to the land destruction deck, but it does have that resiliency in its ability to pivot. It can grind out the blue decks because it doesn't need to just play Balustrade Spy in combo. It can just play mid-range threat, which is what Lotus Petal is here for. Even in the post board, you play the 6th land you can against the blue decks to be able to kind of slow down, and then you can just start forcing out giant threats. You don't even need the Lotus Petal, but you can to be able to play your mountain, and then just play out your giant threats, and Lotus Petal can be there for your other spells, like, you know, you're probably bringing in your Pyroblast and stuff like that. You might be using it for other colors. Regardless, the Lotus Petal is there to help flex out your mana, add to Graveyard Crown should it matter. Not in this deck. It's going to matter in the previous deck for if we go to the kind of rituals here in the 1-land Spy version. I'm forgetting the name of it, but no, Cabal Ritual is the one I'm looking for. Yeah, so Cabal Ritual, caring about Threshold, the number of cards in your graveyard being 7 or more. And so all of this combines to really neat two versions of spy packages where Lotus Petal is the kind of central part of it. And of course, if you want to see gameplay of these two decks, they're on the channel. I've played plenty of 1-land spy if you look through my Pauper playlist, and I've more recently played a lot of 5-land spy as well. I plan to do a lot more of that and explore sideboards like this that are playing Writhing Chrysalis, which I think is kind of interesting. I don't know about that one, but interesting. The third deck that I want to go over that uses Lotus Petal is gonna be Cycle Storm. Now, this has been around for a while, and recently I don't think it's actually had placements post banning. I believe it has like 1 or 2, but not too many. And I think it's just because pilots are trying to get used to it. Now, this isn't the version I'm too much of a fan of. This is the one that Brian Cook has been championing for a while. That's more of a Rakdos land base using the artifact lands. And synergies, like it used to use synergies with Deadly Dispute to be able to kind of sacrifice those artifact lands, keep drawing through, create a treasure token, and just keep your mana going. That's a lot different now. You don't have a 2-mana instant speed, sack something, draw 2 that creates a treasure token, which is the most important part about Deadly Dispute. But you still do have the regular Cycle Storm package. I'm personally using the Grixis version with like Dahada's Ploy and stuff like that. The package is still there. Regardless, ultimately, you're going to play some amount of lands, and you're going to put a bunch of cyclers in your graveyard that cycle for 1. So Drannith Healer, Drannith Stinger, Horde of the Broken Lands, Monstrous, Street Wraith, whatever. With a bunch of creatures in your graveyard, you're then going to cast a bunch of spells. So this is the type of deck where you actually want to hold the Lotus Petal in your hand because you want your storm count high. You want to hold the Lotus Petal in your hand until the turn you want to go off, or if you have to discard a card, you probably want to play the Lotus Petal out so you're not discarding your cyclers because you want to cycle your cyclers and get value out of them. Regardless, you then play a Songs of the Damned or some amount of rituals, and then you increase your storm count to the point where you get to play Reaping the Graves. Reaping the Graves for 3 allows you to return target creature card from your hand, from your graveyard to your hand, and it has Storm on it. So you increase your storm count, you return the cyclers to your hand, you continue cycle through your deck, and you make a bunch of mana. You can then convert that mana with the Lotus Petals, which is important. The Lotus Petals can give you red, notably in this version, or you can play Blood Celebrant, which lets you pay a life and convert the mana into a different color. And you ultimately play Drannith Stinger or Drannith Healer. Drannith Healer lets you gain a life for each time you cycle. Drannith Stinger deals damage to an opponent each time you cycle. So you get to gain some life to be able to maybe keep going through your deck, or you get to Drannith Stinger to be able to ultimately win the game from there. And so therein lies the power of something like Cycle Storm. Again, relatively weak to the control decks, but it does have ways around it because you can win on the stack with it in many ways. You can win in response to removal. You can kind of bait them out. So if you have one Songs of the Damned, you can do another. A lot of what you're doing, your opponent can't counter. Your opponent can't counter in the blue decks the cycling that you're doing. So you can resource yourself up to 2 Songs of the Damned, bait them out into 1, get them to counter the 1 Songs of the Damned. You then in response play the other one, play your Reaping of the Graves and keep going. Unfortunately, the deck is still pretty soft to, discard, and it can be weak to land destruction, but the Lotus Petals can get there. All the combo decks have reached their ways to stop this deck, but this one tends to have a little bit more resiliency. Once you have the Reaping of the Graves going and you have a bunch of mana, it's really hard for the combo decks to stop you, because again, even if they counter the Drannith Stinger, you probably have another Reaping the Graves or can find one to be able to just get it back. Especially the blue-based strategies playing like Mystical Teachings, you're going to be able to like grab another copy and just kind of keep going from there. So regardless, this is Cycle Storm as your way to win with Lotus Petal as part of your package. The last deck that I want to go over is actually Poison Storm, an infect-based win condition. Now, Poison Storm is a little, it's not really the genuine part about this. It's a very much like a mid-range type of combo deck. You're not winning all in one turn. You're playing the slow game, but the storm part of it is Weather the Storm, because at the end of the day, this deck is actually really weak to burn and actually really good against control, because it does a lot of times against combo decks. The control decks will just deploy like one thing at a time. If they don't have the cantrips, they can't really fill their graveyard. And so you are comfortable with just playing like these depletion lands that, just play tap and go, play tapped and go, play tapped and go, and just develop your mana. And once you're ready, then you can start deploying things like the Infectious Inquiry, or play things like the one of, this deck, I'm not sure if it has the one of. It doesn't. So, and it does the Prologue to Phyrexis, which is instant speed and gives your opponent infect counter. The key is you're playing a bunch of things with counters on them. So the depletion lands have counters on them. The Pentad Prism has counters on them. And your opponent is now going to have infect counters on them. You're going to play a bunch of cards like Experimental Augury, Contentious Plan, Vivisurgent's Insight, which draws you cards and proliferates. And so you play that slow game. You proliferate the counters on your land so they never go away, and your lands tap for 2. You proliferate the counters on the Pentad Prism. You can proliferate counters on Everflowing Chalice. The amount of colorless mana you get is going to be really helpful to be able to hard cast Lorien Reveals and Vivid Surgeon's Insights later on in the game. And then you just keep drawing and drawing and drawing. And sometimes you can have big turns where you cast Snap, and you can snap and return an opponent's threat that might beat you next turn, but you can return that and untap 2 of your lands. And just keep going and going and going. Now, the Lotus Petal version of this deck helps you get out really fast. There are some crazy lines you can get out there where you play Depletion Land, then you untap, play Lotus Petal, sack the Lotus Petal for a different color, play Pentad Prism, on turn 2, play another tap Depletion Land, and then you can play like a Contentious Plan and you're proliferating from there. You have so much setup. Lotus Petal really helps speed this deck up and gives you some of the crazier starts. And Lotus Petal also helps clean up some of your mana. You have a lot of blue, but there are going to be draws where you just don't have the mana that you need. You don't have your Pentad Prisms, and it helps you cast like the 1-up Breath Weapon. It helps you cast your Weather the Storms against aggressive strategies. And because you're seeing so much blue, you need that mana fixing with Lotus Petal, and especially early on, to be able to just get your plan going. And so Poison Storm, again, a relatively slower deck, weak against burn, can be weak against like low to the ground aggro, something like Elves. Like some of the nut draws that Elves has can be absolutely insane. You don't find your breath weapons, so having something like a Lotus Petal to just get set up, get drawing, get going, to be able to find your infect, find your sideboard cards, and get winning from there is going to be really important. Again, better placed against the control decks because you just have to be better with your resources and when you can cast things. There's a couple things such as the Steady Progress, which we can cast at instant speed. Unfortunately, Infectious Inquiry is not instant speed. The card would probably be a little too good if it was instant speed. It probably wouldn't be a common at all. So having instant speed things helps against those control decks to be able to force out mana on their turn. So it's a lot better placed against that. Again, another Lotus Petal strategy. Now, notably, this deck actually doesn't require Lotus Petal. If you didn't play Lotus Petal, you would actually just go up on 2 more depletion lands, like the red ones, and you'd go up on 2 more snaps. So there are versions that are 5-0ing, especially Kalikai's, like he's a fellow content creator and Pauper creator. Shout out to him. He's a really big and just a good combo player, good Pauper player, but a really big proponent of the Poison Storm deck. He actually recently 5-0'd with the non-Lotus Petal version. I personally love the Lotus Petal version. I like just the speed you get. Again, that turn 2, untap with the depletion land, play the Lotus Petal, create a prismatic prism with 2 counters on it, play another depletion land, and then like a cycle out with something like a Contentious Plan gives you so much gas on the turn after. So I really like the ability that card gives you to be able to continue through your strategy. Now, those are all the kind of decks that I have with Lotus Petal centrally in them. The one thing I can't escape from Lotus Petal that I always want to promote here is reprints. Unfortunately, Lotus Petal is a very expensive Magic card. It is somewhere in the range of $20 to $40, wherever you can find it. If you're looking for foils, you're a madman. You're absolutely crazy. I bought my Lotus Petals much cheaper and years ago. I did not pay $25 a pop for Lotus Petals. I think I paid like, I have like LP, and I bought them for like 12 or 15. It was something like that. It was still, for a common, it was an amount of money. But for Lotus Petals, fine. They see eternal play. There's value in them. I'm slowly trying to get into Legacy as well in paper. So there's value in something like Lotus Petal. Now, I don't know how they will reprint Lotus Petal. It won't ever be reprinted at common. It'd be insane. They won't print this into a standard legal set anytime soon, unless Wizards' philosophy with fire design is different. And now this, honestly, Lotus Petal wouldn't even be fire design. It would just be torrential magma flame design. It would just be blow up the world design, because no way you put Lotus Petal into standard format. So I would love to see Wizards address the reprinting of this card. It's very hard to get in paper, and especially if Gavin is going to hold true to his announcement of bringing on digital Pauper RCQ events, qualifying you into official tournaments and everything down the line. Lotus Petal's availability is going to be a real big problem to look at. It's what I talked about in a previous video. I've talked about it in a short as well, but I don't know how they address this. I really want them to address certain cards in Pauper. Certain ones like Dread Return is another one. Even the rising prices of some things like, Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast and stuff like that. Like the rising prices of some of these cards that just don't see recent reprints. And even if they do, like Snuff Out is a card that's really expensive, but like recently only got printed as a 1-of in a commander deck. That's not a reprint. You know what I mean? That's not going to lower the price of the card. If anything, it's going to increase the price of the card, and that specific copy is going to go up because it's like a unique art. It's a unique foil or whatever it might be. So I'd really like for Wizards of the Coast to address the reprint problem in Pauper for certain staples, Lotus Petal namely. Lotus Petal has that bigger problem of just being a legacy playable, vintage playable card as well. It's restricted in vintage, as you saw. But regardless, Lotus Petal is one of my favorite cards in Pauper, and I wanted to just showcase this because I've been going to a lot of Pauper locals recently, and I've been bringing about all my Lotus Petal decks. And I'll, in between rounds, I'll be like, hey, you want to play another combo deck? You want to play another combo deck? And I'll just go and swap a little, and then we'll just play something up real quick. And so I've been having a lot of fun with my combo decks. I like how balanced these combo decks are in Pauper. Yes, you can get off to some crazy wins, but they're so easy to answer. And so opponents don't feel that bad. Like, you bring in a couple sideboard cards, you play out your plan, but you still have to be aware. You still have to be aware that these decks do have answers. And in some cases, they do have resiliency that can get around the answers, even in main boards. And so that brings about the power that Lotus Petal provides, the flexibility in mana, the adding to the graveyard, the adding to the storm count even, as you saw with Cycle Storm. Lotus Petal is just one of the better cards out there, especially in Pauper with the unique cases it provides. It's not just ramp, it's not just instant mana to be able to do something broken. It does provide so much flexibility and one of the best formats in Magic the Gathering.